So, good evening, everyone, or should I say good night? Special welcome to persons from Tobago, Trinidad, and the diaspora. You know, tonight is a very serious conversation. They say the government removed VAT on salt. And you know what? When you think about it, it really makes sense. Because salt is all we're going to have to suck for the next year with this budget. We call it a Robin Hood budget, but this one is not robbing the rich to give to the poor. It's robbing the working class to rescue the government's poor decision making over a number of years. They boast about giving you $1 off of gas, a promise of the 10% raise for public servants, and removal of VAT on a few items for food. But we have to ask how much of that is going to really reach your pockets. So tonight we are breaking it down like a balance sheet. One side say plus the things they claim to give you, and the other side is a minus. What is really costing you in your bills, your groceries, your rent, and most of all, your peace of mind. So, share the live. Let us get some more persons on, because this is going to be a very serious conversation um, as to, you know, where we are really going in this country. So let's share the live. Share the live. Okay. All right. So let's continue. Like I said, this is going to be quite harsh on who we are and our budgets. Um, so let's start with what they're telling us to celebrate. You know, $1 off from gas, 10% wage increase, and the removal of VAT on items like salt and some other basic foods. Supposedly, they say to help the poor. They want to tax the big boys like the banks and the insurance companies, the landlords and the cigarette and alcohol companies, and supposedly make the rich pay. They want to um, secure your pension by increasing the modernizing the NIS, increasing your contributions and having you work till 65, which is a plus. They say it will secure your pension down the road. And while all that sounds nice and dandy, when you flip the page, on the other side of the page, and you start to see the minus going down, you ask yourself what is really taking place. So we see where we got $1 off for gas, and that dollar off for gas, I wonder how far it's going to go, because as they take off the dollar for the gas, your light bill says a different story for the business sector. And so the business sector will pay extra at the commercial rate for electricity. Now, if you have a bakery using about 20,000 units per month, they're going to pay an extra $1,000 per month on their electricity bill. A supermarket may pay an additional $2,000 per month. Okay? The guest house in Crown Point, the barber shop in Roxborough, all are going to be affected by the lights that they have to work with. But guess what? You think that that bill is staying with them? No. We, the citizens, will be footing that bill because whoever is in business naturally will pass on those expenses to the consumer. So we may very well see you got to pay more for bread, you got to pay more for groceries, even, things to drink, everything may end up going up. Right? So we may have saved the dollar in the gas at the pump, but certainly we're paying more elsewhere. Excuse me. And so we also have the 10% wage increase. But guess what? It was very surprising to note that when they finally got down into the details, you say the devil is in the details. When they got down to the details, there was no line item created yet for this increase of the 10%. And you're now hearing that they have to go back to, the negotiations to get it. They're committed, but you still have to go back to the negotiating table for it. So while the teachers, the nurses, the police, and all others who waiting on this money for Christmas, there will be no 10% in your salary for Christmas because there's no allocation, there's no timeline, and no plan, currently by the government as to when they will be able to pay this 10% and how much they will be able to pay. So by the time, the 10% comes around, a lot more has been leaving your pockets. So we say we remove the VAT on basic food items like salt and, so a few other things. But when you compare that to the increased NIS contributions that you will be making, it somehow is, less money that you're taking home now to be able to go to the grocery and buy. And I know some people think that it is not much money, but when you have somebody who is making maybe $5,000 a month and their deductions jump from 220 to 320 and they're getting about $100 or a little over that less in their hands, that makes a difference for some people, because there's some people who have a lot of bills for that 5,000 that they're paying, a lot of commitments, and that $100 makes a difference. So whilst we hear of the promise down the road, it doesn't negate the fact that we are in for a rough ride this year. And when you think it can't get worse, it can. Because the employer, that's the employee, but the employer has to be paying double that. Yeah, because remember, the employee pays 1/3 and the employer has to pay 2/3. Okay, so the employer's fees also for the NIS on each employee will be doubled. And so when you look at small businesses, they have a few decisions to make. Number one, can they afford to continue hiring the amount of people they are hiring? Can they afford to keep their business or their doors open? right? Do they have to close down, which would mean that, people are losing jobs? Uh, or are they going to simply just pass on those expenses to the consumer, which would be you and I? Yeah. So are they going to pass on those expenses to the consumers? And at the end of the day, again, we have increase in our cost of living, the bread increase, the juice increase, the milk increase, the same salt that you get the VAT off of will increase, you know, um, and it becomes, it's a struggle. It's a struggle all around. Um, and then we have what we call the sin taxes, where they say they're increasing the tax on alcohol and cigarettes to promote health. But what does that really do? You have the double the price of beer, raise the cost of rum, and wipe out you're gonna wipe out some small bars and parlors because they depend on the after work sales for people to come and de-stress. And people more stressed now. Well, they can't buy as much as they used to. Even if they go to the parlor, they're not buying as many drinks, and some may not even bother to go to the parlor anymore. um, you then create a business, underground business of, maybe people making a little alcohol on the side, a little babash on the side, and dealing with it that way. Yeah. Or for those who smoke, they could decide that it may be cheaper to smoke something else than to smoke a cigarette. So, sometimes we make decisions and not realizing that, you know, with every action comes a reaction. And how do you mitigate against the negative reaction that may occur? So those are some of the situations that we are having. Even the poor fisherman who come in from, by fishing, a hard day work, now realize you are paid twice. So what is he gonna do? Now increase the cost of the fish so he can afford to go and take a drink. So you see how it is being passed on to the consumers at every turn. So they talk about the levy on the banks and the insurance, uh, that they're supposed to be, you know, um, taking money from the big boys, the banks and the insurance companies. But that's, all of these businesses, all they're going to do is just pass on the by giving you a higher loan rate, or new service fees, or more insurance premiums. They're going to find a way to keep their profit margins. Yeah, let's be honest. And what will happen is that, again, the consumer will get the raw end of the stick in all of this. So the man who is trying to insure his taxi, the premium's gonna go up. Small business applying for a loan, interest rate going up. The young couple trying to buy a house, mortgage rate going up. Okay, so the balance sheet, you want to tax the banks, but in truth, you're taxing you through the banks. So they're giving you, they're creating middlemen instead of taxing you directly. At the end of the day, you're the one bearing the brunt of it. Let's not even talk about this landlord registration. And you have this landlord registration of $2,500 a year, and a rental tax of an additional percentage on whatever the landlord earns. And the percentage goes up if you're earning more than, I think, $20,000 a year. Again, who is that going to affect? It's going to affect the renter, because those fees are going to be passed on, especially the $2,500 registration. It will just be passed on, so persons will end up paying a higher rent if you could afford to pay it, or you have to move out, or the um, the landlord decide, well, this is not worth doing anymore, so let me stop renting. But I want to ask, perhaps, how does it affect um, our guest houses that may be renting to tourists for longer terms, longer stays? I'm not sure about that yet. That is something that we have to look into. Is it going to affect our tourism product? And that is something that we will have to look at. Yeah. So every dollar that the government says it's going to collect, it's not coming from the middleman. It's coming from our pockets. Your pocket, my pocket, our pockets. Your business and your homes. Yeah? And in addition to that, I see where some of the social programs like um, school feeding and books, support to our school children, especially to help the vulnerable, those have even been decreased in the allocation in terms of how much help they're going to be given. So even though they're taking extra money out of your pockets, you're not getting it back, you're not seeing it going back anywhere. So it's going to be hard all around, and I think the government has to recognize that you cannot balance a national budget by unbalancing people's lives like this. You can't fix the country by breaking your citizens like this. You know, these decisions are not the best decisions. I mean, might as well you go to the IMF, because these austerity measures are kind of severe right now, and it's not making sense. The average citizen is not seeing their way out of this. you know so in essence, we call the theme a Robin Hood budget, but you can't really call it Robin Hood if the poor ending up poorer and the powerful end up protected, which is the government. And we can't continue this way. So the government needs to realize that you can't have your citizens sucking salt and calling it seasoning. And they need to bring the experts around the table and truly look at diversifying the economy away from oil and gas, and stop taxing the citizens into prosperity of this country. It is not going to work. There are many more examples around the region of other islands and other countries that do not have oil and gas, and their economy is doing way better than the Trinidad and Tobago economy. And so I'm imploring that the government has to do research, has to move away from the oil and gas, and has to start investing in other areas, because the crime situation will get worse. When people are forced into a situation of deepening poverty, what you want them to do? They have to feed their families. Imagine how this whole budget is going to affect the harvest for people in Tobago. A harvest where people go around and enjoy themselves and come together. All that is going to be, you know, affected in some way. And it doesn't have to be. If the government truly wants to, they can look closely at how they are going to diversify, look at the avenues, look at Tobago as the opportunity for that diversification thrust, and invest in that, and stop taxing our citizens into prosperity. The government also needs to look at a different type of uh, plan for the pension, and perhaps instead of taxing the banks and the insurance companies, sit with them and ask them what are the options for truly driving a more prosperous package for our people with their pension plans. I am sure they could come up with a brilliant idea such that we are not just taking from our people, but that when they are done, they could actually see serious returns on their monies from all this money they're paying into the NIS fund, and not being told that there's a chance that they may not get it down the road. Okay, so let me say a pleasant good night to you all, and thank you for staying uh, on the live with me tonight. And please continue sharing the live, because this is a conversation that we have to have a reality check on. So thank you, and see you next week when we continue to break the silence.